year after the Carlton Towers tragedy, many lost their near and dear ones, the devastating fire that engulfed the building. You lost your son. How has the tragedy changed your life? How have you all been coping with your lives?
So just to correct you, it's 2 years since the accident happened, but it still feels like yesterday to us.
It's 2 years, is it?
You said 1 year. It's 1 year, you said.
It's 2 years after the Carlton.
Howda? Okay, sorry.
It's okay. Tell me.
Yeah. Well, to answer how we are coping with it, it's needless to say, like I said, it just feels like it's happened yesterday on a personal level. And I think that's the way it's going to be for all the families who lost somebody on that particular accident, or with any other accident that happens for that matter. It is, in a way, the reason why we are doing what we're doing. So if one had to turn around and look at it positively, and the fact that, you know, people seem to have recognized us through this award, and for me, let me just tell you, it's extremely special, this award, primarily because it's been given out by the citizens of Bangalore, which in a way tells us that somewhere we seem to be touching their lives and our story seems to be resonating with them. And we do hope that this inspiration through this award will help us continue in the journey we've just embarked.
Uday, you launched Beyond Carlton after the tragedy. Its two main objectives were: 1, to bring in accountability; 2, to spread awareness. Has it yielded the desired result?
Mr. Balram, just to respond to your questions, yes, you're absolutely right. We are kind of focused on those two primary purposes of accountability and awareness. As far as accountability is concerned, we must remember we're dealing with many elements. The elements include the government, the elements include the fire services department, it includes building owners, it includes the average citizen. So yes, to answer your question of where have we reached on accountability, we in some sense have made some small gains. We filed a PIL in the High Court, and as of July 7th of last year, there was a new notification issued by the state of Karnataka, and this primarily pertains to high-rise buildings in the state of Karnataka, and it has become extremely stringent in terms of fire safety laws that need to be followed. The challenge is, one, to get a law in place which is a little more stringent, but the bigger challenge is in its implementation, as we all know in India, and that's really where our new battle or our fresh battle will really begin. So that's one area of what we're trying to do. As far as getting people accountable for the Carlton Towers incident, we are a little limited on that fact because you know, the case is lying in the courts and is sub judice at this moment. So to that extent, we cannot really make any comments. The case is still on, but we are hoping that at the end of the day, the families who lost somebody will really get justice for no fault of those 9 who lost their lives.
Uday, you said that you moved the High Court and you managed to get a legislation in place that every building has to get the approval or NOC from fire brigade to get the final license. Is the rule being strictly adhered to?
Well, the notification said that in 9 months' time from July 7th, which ends as of 31st March, the fire department should have inspected all high-rise buildings in the city of Bangalore. We have filed an RTI to try and figure out how many of these high-rise buildings have been checked. I have written personally to the fire department asking them, but I have got no response to that. So I don't have an answer to tell you whether 30 buildings have been checked or 30,000 have been checked at this point of time. But I think what the lesson we've learned is to keep pegging away. You know, you got to keep pushing, you got to keep, you know, keep being focused on some of these elements, and only over a period of time would you see change. Because the moment we pull our foot off the pedal, it's likely that everybody will sit back and not worry ourselves again about, you know, either a notification or so. One thing that we have tried to do is create awareness about the notification itself, because it's unlikely that any department will go around with a loudspeaker saying there's a new notification. And we felt that unless we go and tell the public, they wouldn't even know, and possibly somebody from the fire department would come and inspect the building, and they could be caught off guard, and it could lead to various other reasons and other issues that could come out of that. So we actually went out and reached out to well-known Bangaloreans who lifted their hands up and said, we are willing to help you pass this message through. So we are fortunate, and we'd like to thank Justice Santosh Hegde, Mr. Anil Kumble, and Mr. Ramesh Arvind, who without any hesitation came on board and said, we will pass on this message to you, and have recorded radio spots and stuff like that for us, with a singular message of saying there's a new notification in place, please go and ask the fire department about it.
But the government made a number of promises after the tragedy, as always any government does whenever a tragedy happens. Have they fulfilled any of the promises?
Well, it's unfortunate that you need accidents of the kind that happened in Carlton or at AMRI or Upahar or whatever else for people to sit up and take notice. That's the unfortunate part of the way we live, especially here in India. But to go back to your question of did the government keep up to its promises? Well, the promises that they made were primarily for the families was in compensation, which they have kept up to. We do understand there were some promises made towards the injured, which some of our injured members say they haven't been kept up to. We have tried to raise the issue with the government, but we have not really reached any conclusion there. But as far as streamlining, let's say traffic management, the fire department, I think we still have a long way to go, because in an accident of the kind that happened at Carlton, it's not just the fire department who is to blame. Everything that was systemically wrong went wrong that day, and that could happen again tomorrow. And the issue is, are we really geared for a situation of that kind, which we are still a little unsure we get for this kind. We just got to live on hope that we don't have one more of that kind of accidents.
Uday, usually such an initiative like Beyond Carlton fails to sorry Uday, usually such an initiative like Beyond Carlton fails to gather momentum once the seriousness dies. How have you managed to sustain it?
You're absolutely right. I mean, momentum could be lost either because of the group that runs it, or it could be lost because there isn't an incident of that kind. I think we are, I hate to say this, fortunate in both ways. We are fortunate because as a group we are fairly serious about what we want to do, and therefore the sustained effort that we are doing, be it through the notifications, be it through media pressure that we are building in. The second is really, fire accidents didn't end with the Carlton Towers incident. So each time there is a fire accident, fortunately today we are the referral point by media for anything of this sort. So whether it's AMRI or whether there is a national debate, we keep getting called for some of these to participate in it, both as people who have tried to make a change and are wanting to make a difference in the space.
Uday, are you happy with the preparedness of the fire brigade after the tragedy? I believe it is still understaffed, starved of funds, and lacks modern equipment. And are there enough fire stations?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mr. Balram. The fire department, unfortunately, in Karnataka is woefully short of its requirement, its basic needs. They're not even at a threshold level. To answer your question of do we have enough fire stations, I think there was a report that they themselves generated internally which said that the city of Bangalore required something like around 70 fire stations. And when I last checked, which was about 3-4 months ago, we had about 13 fire stations in Bangalore and 7 were underway, so made it 20. Even if we get to 20, we're still 50 fire stations short, which is woefully short for a city of the size that like we are in. To talk about manpower, there was a recent CAG report, which is a government audit, not done by us or by anybody else, which actually turned around and said that the fire services in the state are woefully short of resources, manpower, and they haven't hired people. And that's an issue that we want to really address with the government, and we are trying to seek appointment with people and trying to see if we can go and influence them in some way, saying it's as big an issue as, let's say, water not being there for somebody or electricity not being there for someone.
Uday, you say that you have become a referral point to the media. have you become a referral point to the fire brigade even, or any civic agencies, or even the government?
Well, not as yet, sir, because the media to us is a spokesperson of what we want to be conveying, and we are very fortunate, and we'd like to thank the media for supporting our cause and supporting what we want to convey. Well, to be able to become a spokesperson for the fire department would, in my mind, in a sense, be turning around and taking some of their own issues onto our back. And while I have referred to this in an earlier media interview too, I believe we need to use a carrot and stick approach with the fire department. On the one hand, we, as you know, actually award firemen every year. Despite the fact that my own family turned around and said, why would you give an award to a fireman when they couldn't save your son? We still believe that those firemen are the unsung heroes in some way. They go and risk their lives with or without equipment to try and save somebody else's. Let's also not forget that while in Carlton we lost 9 people, there were 60 who were injured who were saved. And that was possibly also due to some of those firemen. And therefore, we need to recognize that those people are fighting a lot of odds, and we need to be able to support them. So to go back to your question, I think we need to be able to empower the fire department through better resources, through better training, through better machinery. But at the same time, we need to be like a watchdog on what they're not performing on. And the moment we start becoming, let's say, either a spokesperson for the fire department or a referral point, we may just lose the position we are in at this point of time.
Do they call you for any discussions anytime? I mean the fire department.
Not as yet, sir. Not officially as yet. We do have a very good relationship with the fire department, I must confess that. Primarily because they see us working in some ways to their benefit too. But have I been on a forum with the fire department? Yes. And these are forums where we've been called and they've been called in some sense. But if it's let's say a discussion they're organizing, as yet they may be a little petrified of me being around.